Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Monday, September 22nd, and we had a lot of really good football this past weekend. We had a number of teams make some big-time statements like Texas Tech, Michigan, Oklahoma, and Indiana. We will start with those first, obviously. Then we'll get into some other big-time games. We had Miami kind of roll over Florida. Very weird game over there where Florida was in it for a second and then Miami kind of turned it up and took over. Missouri gets a huge win over South Carolina. Arkansas upset in just about the same way they lost last week, and a couple other things. Clemson losing as well. Then we just got to whip around to a number of other things. Arch Manning in Texas finally looked the part against Sam Houston State. We'll talk about that a little bit later. A number of other things, and then I have my first top 25. I figure we should wait through at least 4 weeks of the college football season before I give out my top 25. This was really hard to put together, so spare me just a little bit, but would love to interact with people and see what people think about that top 25 that we will get into at the very end of the show. But we had statement wins all over the place this past weekend. It was one of those weekends where you went in, you didn't have an Alabama-Georgia, you didn't have an Oregon-Penn State like we had this upcoming weekend, but you had a lot of games that were going to impact the CFP race, and a lot of them, the teams really kind of planted their flag a little bit more aggressively than I thought they would, and we'll start with Texas Tech. Texas Tech beat Utah on the road 34-10. This was incredible, and it was a game for much of this game. You know, going into the fourth quarter, it was 10-10. It was a very close battle. Baron Morton leaves the game with an injury after a very scary hit. Don't know what the update is with him, but we'll talk about that here in a second. But he had 2 INTs when he left the game as well. It was just very much a defensive battle for a long time, and people were thinking, are these teams ever going to find a way? Is it going to be a 13-10 game where it's just whoever has the ball last is going to be able to win this one? And then Will Hammond came into this game, and he tore apart that Utah defense. It looked like Utah kind of got a little bit tired out, a little bit worn down by the end of this game, and it's a huge credit to what Texas Tech has built, especially on the lines of scrimmage, and we'll talk about that in a second as well. But at the end of the day, Will Hammond coming in, going 13 for 16, 169 yards, 2 scores, and then adding 61 rushing. That's crazy from the kid, and a lot of people have been talking about should that be their starting quarterback going forward. I think there's an argument to be made there. I think the other part of that is Baron Morton's the outright leader of this football team. Him and Jacob Rodriguez are the guys that everyone looks to at every practice, at every workout, at every walkthrough. I tend to believe it's going to be Baron Morton's team. Obviously, with his injury, that kind of makes things a little bit up in the air, and we'll talk about what they have ahead. I tend to believe Will Hammond can, at the very least, get them wins until they get Baron Morton back to 100%. But I came into this game saying one thing for absolute certain. If there was a decided advantage on one side of the Utah offensive line against the Texas Tech defensive line battle, if there was a decided advantage one of those directions, that team might just be a little bit more than the Big 12 contender. It wasn't decided, but Texas Tech won this battle on the line of scrimmage. There's no two ways about that. Even on the defensive side of the ball with that incredible offensive line that Utah has, and it is incredible. It truly is. They're going to have 2 guys that get taken in the top 15 in the NFL draft. The rest of the guys are probably taken by pick 90 or 120 in the draft. They have dudes all across that line. Texas Tech nailed it. In the portal, they go get Lee Hunter. They have Skylar Gill-Howard in that room. They have Romello Height. They have so many guys. David Bailey, obviously, an incredible player coming over from Stanford. They have so many guys that are going to play NFL football where you look back at last year's team, they had talented players. Those guys aren't going off to play on Sundays. Now they're in the 2 deep or the 3 deep, and it makes it look a whole lot better up front for Texas Tech. So they hit on just about every single portal addition they made on the defensive side of the ball, including a guy like Bryce Pollock, played incredible defense on the outside for the vast majority of this football game. So Utah only had 3.8 yards per play in this entire game. They dominated this one. I believe 3.3 yards per carry, so it was incredible from this Texas Tech defensive line, and we'll talk about it here in a second, but they might be capable of a little bit more than just a Big 12 title. But for Utah, they looked a little bit lost offensively, and a lot of that has to do with the offensive line not playing the game that they are accustomed to them playing up there at Utah. But at the end of the day, it's a large credit to Texas Tech. It's going to be hard for me to sell on Utah. I'll be totally honest with you. I love the quarterback. I really do think this is more a blip on the radar and a credit to Texas Tech than anything else. That being said, you got outcoached and outplayed and out-physicaled from start to finish in this game. That doesn't happen to Utah very often. So there's definitely some things they have to figure out. Devin Dampier struggled for the first time this year. They go to Morgantown this weekend, so it's not like you're going to walk into a nice environment to get things right, but that should be a team you can beat. And then it's Arizona State and BYU. Got to get better fast. Got to find a way to win those 3 games. And then we could very well see this again in Arlington. Hopefully Utah can make it maybe a little bit more interesting that time around. But TCU is still lingering. Iowa State. There's a lot of teams in the Big 12 that will have something to say about it by the end. But this very well could have been a preview for the Big 12 championship. Just got to hope Utah plays a little bit better when it comes to that. But really can't say enough about Texas Tech. The job that Joey McGuire has done, not only going out and getting the guys, but getting the right guys that don't just walk into that locker room and immediately want to be the star of the defense or the star of the team overall. It's an incredible culture. He's done a great job over there, and now they have the talent that matches what the culture is, what they've done. Now, there are some problems. There's no doubt about that. No one player is shouldering the load, which is massive for this football team. I believe they had 3 guys with 60-plus receiving yards, so a lot of things went right in this football game for them. But 12 penalties, 122 yards. That can absolutely be a problem down the road. A couple of things to fix, but this Texas Tech team is incredibly impressive. A bye week next week before they get a Houston team that looks to be a little bit tougher than maybe some people thought before, but this team is rolling right now, and I think Texas Tech is firmly the team to beat in the Big 12. Michigan put on a show, 30-27 over Nebraska. It was 30-27. I fully understand that this game was close, that Michigan found a way to get a kick late to win this game. I don't know. It just felt worse than that. And I think part of it was Michigan totally misplayed the end of the first half where you let Nebraska get that Hail Mary at the end of it, and it changes the complexion of that football game. No doubt about it. But at the end of the day, it just felt like this was Michigan's game from start to finish. Dylan Raiola started really slow, just didn't really have a lot of comfort early on. Did kind of find it throughout this football game. We'll talk about him here in a second. But overall, you get a 75-yard run from Justice Haynes just about every week, you're going to be doing some pretty cool things offensively. But the rushing trio of Bryce Underwood, Justice Haynes, and Jordan Marshall is just going to be really, really hard to stop. They all had 30-plus yard rushing touchdowns. They had 31 carries total for 290 yards. It was ridiculous what this group was able to do. Now, the offensive line is going to run into probably bigger units, more physical units down the road, both in the Big Ten and in the playoff hypothetically. But at the end of the day, this is an incredible, incredible run game, and it's going to get them a very, very long way in this season. But remarkable stuff from them. From the start of the second half to about 3:54 left in this game, Michigan outgained Nebraska 189-49. They outscored them 13-3, and in the Big Ten, that's a whole lot of points. Is 10 points during that time. So that was the difference. Michigan found a way to come out of halftime and fix the things that were a problem in the first half, and they made enough plays late. But on the other side of things, for Nebraska, Dylan Raiola, I still think this is a good football player. I think he gets a little bit of happy feet early on. I think the offensive line not playing good football does not help that by any means, but I think there are some bad habits that he's going to have to get out of his system. A little bit, I don't want to say lazy, but just a little bit kind of my arm talent will handle this type of energy, kind of like a Quinn Ewers had at times during Texas. Just one of those things that you're going to need a little bit more crispness from him. I think he's an NFL quarterback. I really do. I do think he's going to end up being a great player, but when you go up against a defensive line like that and a defensive coordinator like that, he's going to have to be a lot crisper and a lot quicker through his reads than he was on Saturday. But also, the run game's got to give him more than 91 and 92 yards, so that is also a factor in this, no doubt about it. The people around him need to play better, but on top of that, I think he does need to play better, and I tend to believe that will come in time. Totally understand that Nebraska fans are getting maybe a little bit restless because this was the game. There's no doubt about that. This was the game where a lot of things change, where you win a big-time game against one of the teams that you haven't been able to beat before, and you find a way to go forward, where you have a bye this upcoming week. Then you get Michigan State, Maryland, Minnesota, Northwestern. You can be 7-1 walking into USC. Now, you could have been 8-0, and that would have been really awesome, but you could still be 7-1 walking into USC. You win that, you're back in the CFP conversation. I'm worried about this Nebraska team. There's no doubt about that. When you let a team kind of dominate you physically on the lines of scrimmage that aggressively, I don't know how confident I can feel that you're not going to slip up in the Big Ten at some point when you face these big body teams that they are going to face at some point. So I'm on the fence with Nebraska, I think. I think 2026 might be more the year. I saw someone actually comment on the page and made a great point that maybe this just isn't quite the year. They're not all the way there. If the offensive line gets a little bit better, the weapons get a little bit better, maybe 2026 everything clicks for Nebraska, but this one's got to be frustrating. There's no doubt about that. I think everyone looked at this game and said, if we can find a way to win in front of our home crowd against a top 25 team and a team like Michigan with that amount of prestige, it's going to be the moment. It doesn't change that this season can still have a ton of positives. You can go 10-2. You can still be in the playoff conversation, maybe in the playoff. A lot of great things can happen for this football team. And even if they don't go 10-2, you can go 9-3 and continue to build this thing up. And then 2026, you make a couple more portal moves. You find a way to finally put this thing all the way together. But it's got to be really frustrating. You're right at the top of the mountaintop. You feel like you're about to touch where you want to be, and then you fall back down. You got to figure it out. So plenty ahead for Nebraska. For Michigan, definitely a little bit of a tough path, but the reality is this is a very good football team that's going to be physically imposing about just about every team that they play. But they get a bye week, then Wisconsin should be a relative layup, USC, and then Washington. They win all of those, they very well might be a CFP team once again this year, which was not what I was thinking after the Oklahoma game. I can promise you that. Speaking of Oklahoma gets a win kind of like that Michigan game. They had a little bit more control in the Michigan game, to be fair, but they win 24-17 over Auburn. That 24 did a lot of help for -6.5 Oklahoma bettors, but at the end of the day, this one's really, really interesting. And we will get to the game here in a second, but we have to talk about the officiating. It was terrible. It was truly terrible. And it's not to say that Auburn got absolutely robbed. It's not to say that Auburn would have won this game by 14 if the calls went the right way. It's just to say we had multiple instances where the wrong thing happened, plain and simple. You have the play with Isaiah Zatania, and everyone I've seen that's trying to argue Oklahoma's side says, well, he points at the ref. That just means that ref is bad at his job too. Plain and simple. That just means that ref is not good at his job the same way the head ref is, the same way the people in the booth not doing what they need to do and blowing that play dead are bad at their jobs. That doesn't make this better. It just makes it goofy. Also, the fact that they ran it all week doesn't make it better. It just means they ran an illegal play all week. That was ridiculous. That is absolutely something that should never happen. It's something that every ref should know to do. And frankly, a lot of refs that I've heard throughout the last couple of days have said, that's pretty much day one stuff. That is absolutely ridiculous that they missed that. The fumble review, we can argue about that all day. I fully understand that. I would actually argue that it was more incomplete than a fumble, if I'm being totally honest. It looked like that was not necessarily a fumble. That being said, I can ask probably 100 people or 50 people what they thought of that play. I'd probably get two different answers, and it'd probably be relatively split down the middle. That is the argument for this thing to be upheld. I tend to believe it should have been upheld because even I was sitting there saying, I tend to believe it's incomplete. I tend to believe he never had firm control and that ball just pops out and it hits the ground and that's that. But at the end of the day, I don't know that. I had no idea what that was going to look like. I had no idea what that was going to be. That should be an upheld call, plain and simple. And then you miss multiple PIs against Cam Coleman. I get they're going to be physical with that kid, and they very well should. But at the end of the day, you miss some bad ones. Now, it's not to say they all went Oklahoma's direction. Oklahoma had some missed calls that absolutely hurt them. I'm not making that argument at all. But you had two calls in this game that were just atrocious and should never happen and are absolutely ridiculous in my mind. I get the fumble thing. It's complicated, but the reality of the matter is I went on Twitter and saw it is a fumble. It's not a fumble. It's an incompletion. It's a catch. I saw a million different theories of what that play was. That means it should probably be upheld. I don't understand. 99% of games are not decided by refs. I think refs do an incredibly, incredibly hard job and get ripped a lot of the time. The reality of the matter is, though, we don't know who those refs are. I still can't tell you those refs' names. I bet Auburn fans can do that at this point, but I can't tell you those refs' names because they have no structure. They have no accountability to the people that they serve, which are the fans and are the players and are the coaches, and they're falling short, plain and simple. I don't understand why this is the case. 99% of the games are not decided by calls, plain and simple. And I don't know if this one was or wasn't. I know for a fact that a team won by 7 points where 7 of those points should not have been on the board, plain and simple. So that's the reality of the situation. You go back to the LSU South Carolina game last year. That was objectively decided by refs. we have to find a way to be better than this. We have to find a way to, at least the obvious calls, at least the ones where the guy is obviously trying to sub off the field, stops right at the sideline, and then runs a route. You have to know that that can't be allowed. If you don't, I'm sorry, you shouldn't be a ref in the SEC or in college football in general. Very frustrating. Now to the game. Apologies for that little bit of a rant, but we had to talk about that. This one was really, really tough for Auburn. And I think it's one of those games where you look back and you're thinking, that's the turning point. I think kind of like that South Carolina game last year, this Auburn team could very well go 9-3, be sitting at number 14 or 15 in the country, and they're on the outside looking in because of this game. That's got to be incredibly frustrating. Now, here's the big time problem. Your guy just got sacked 10 or 9 times, depending on where you look. I don't know why that's controversial, but at the end of the day, 10 or 9 times in this game you got sacked. A number of them were Jackson Arnold's fault. Just holding onto the ball way too long, not moving, not taking what the defense gives him. He's got to be better about that. And you go to A&M this weekend. If you think Cassius Howell is not going to get after you, you are sadly mistaken. It's going to get bad in a hurry if you keep playing that level of football for Jackson Arnold in that offensive line. Then you get a bye, then it's Georgia and Missouri. It's not going to get easier. You have to get more from your quarterback going forward. If he's going to get sacked 10 times every single game, you're going to lose every single game the rest of the way, and you're going to be the team that had all this hype coming in, looked good through a couple of weeks, and then the Oklahoma game was the one that sunk them. So a lot of things to figure out for them. For Oklahoma, it's as simple as this defense is world-class good, national championship good, and they have a quarterback that will make the plays. He was far from perfect on Saturday. He made a number of mistakes, wasn't necessarily as accurate as he has been in the past. The reality of the matter is you give this guy the ball with about 2.5 minutes left in the game, you're going to win that football game. Plain and simple. He finds a way to get his team down the field. They make play after play. They do the things that they're supposed to do, and he is someone that just makes plays. There is something about him. There's something about certain players in college football, whether you want to talk about Baker Mayfield or Stetson Bennett or someone else. Diego Pavia might be an example here. They just find a way to make plays. When you need a play to be made, they find a way to get it done, and he is one of those guys. So we'll see what happens the rest of the way. I think it's one of those things that Oklahoma probably didn't play their best football. Definitely on the defensive side of the ball, they played incredibly, except Cam Coleman's an alien, which makes things a little bit tougher. But at the end of the day, they played relatively good football, not great. John Mateer didn't play his great football. You find a way to win. You keep moving forward. It's a massive win for you. Then you get Kent State, and then it's Red River. That's the moment where Oklahoma and John Mateer turn from this really cool story that very well could become a really interesting team to a true national title contender. Now, Texas is a little bit questionable at this point. We'll talk about them a little bit later in the show, but at the end of the day, this is a very good football team that just has a defense that is absolutely suffocating and a quarterback that is going to make the plays when you absolutely need him. For Auburn, you're still a really good football team. Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and try to go get a big-time win in College Station. Then you're back to rolling. Indiana just dismantled Illinois. I don't even know what to say. I literally am at a loss for words after this football game because there were a lot of ways that this football game could go. I picked Indiana to win the football game. This is not how I thought it was going to go. Plain and simple. I didn't think Illinois was great. I didn't think they were a top 10 team. I definitely didn't think they were this bad. It was very, very rough. Now, I don't want to take anything away from Indiana saying that Illinois was bad. That's a good football team. That is going to be a team that goes 8-4, 9-3, right in that realm. Very fun team. They play USC this weekend, and we'll talk about that obviously on Wednesday. But you outgain a team by 400 plus yards. You outgain them on the ground 312-2. Ridiculous in every sense of the word. This Indiana team is better than they were last year. They have a quarterback that is better than they had last year, with all due respect to Curtis Rourke. Fernando Mendoza goes 21 for 23, 267, 5 touchdowns, enters the Heisman conversation. This guy's special, and he's a really, really fun player. He plays with passion, plays with energy, and he's a guy that can make every throw that you need him to make. He is going to be a Sunday guy. There's no two ways about that. That is why Indiana went and got him, and weirdly enough, this is a better football team than they had last year, and that was a really good football team despite what some people would say. Now, the schedule helped them. I'm not arguing that, but that was a good football team last year. This team is absolutely for real this year. You have a three-headed monster in the backfield as well. Kobe Martin went for 107, 2 scores. Kalen Black, 89 yards, 1 score. And then Hemby went for 65. it's just ridiculous what they can do up front. Pat Coogan's an incredible addition from Notre Dame at center. They've done an incredible job. Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper dominated. Can't say enough. I really love this Indiana team. It was a team that coming in, I felt like people kind of sold just a little bit too much. I was worried about them coming in with a lot of changes, but at the end of the day, when you have guys like D'Angelo Pons, Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper, Aiden Fisher, I was blanking on the linebacker's name. You're going to do a lot of special things, and man, did they do something special on Saturday. For Illinois, it didn't look right from the jump. You only had 29 rushing yards on 11 carries by running backs, and Altmaier went backwards a whole lot in this football game. One 59-yard touchdown. Early in this game, Colin Dixon was the only bright spot. You got to regroup because you got USC coming to town, and that offense is probably as potent as the Indiana offense for a number of reasons. So you got to be very, very careful, but going back to Indiana here for a second, just for half a second here, can't say enough about how hard what Curt Cignetti is doing right now is. Obviously, the portal gives you a leg up to build something like this relatively quickly and get this thing off the ground and do some incredible things pretty quickly in your tenure. No doubt about that. The reality is, coming into a place, transferring in a bunch of guys, going from the Group of 5 level to the Big Ten, and being able to win at the clip that he did last year, even with the schedule they had, was relatively impressive. Being able to do it after you lose your quarterback and after you lose a guy like CJ West up front and you lose some big-time pieces, and then put it back together and be better the next year, ridiculous, especially bringing in a quarterback that is new to the system and is still figuring things out, and you have a number of moving parts in this program. This team's better than it was last year, and I don't think it's all that close. So it is a really, really special team. We'll talk about them later, obviously, in my top 25. We'll talk about them pretty close to We'll talk about them later in the top 25 is the way that I'll put that. But Indiana goes to Iowa this weekend. Huge one. It's one that absolutely is a trap game. You got to be very careful. Then you get a bye week, and then it's Oregon. You find a way to win that game, you are in the CFP. I feel very confident in that. Even if you lose it, you're very much in the conversation down the stretch. Huge win for them. They are very much in really good shape moving forward. As we talked about with Illinois, they get USC, which is going to be something to watch, absolutely. But at the end of the day, both these teams are still relatively in it. I don't think Illinois is going to be able to put it together to the degree that they're going to need to. I think Indiana is going to be able to. It's going to be really fun to watch what they do against Iowa this weekend, and then we got a big one against Oregon coming up, and then Illinois regroup against USC, and we'll see what happens in a couple of weeks here. But an incredible couple of games. It was 4 teams that came into this weekend, 8 teams that came into this weekend saying, we get this win, a lot changes in a hurry. Whether it was Utah getting a win and totally planting their flag in the Big 12, or Nebraska finding a way to become a CFP team, Auburn would have been a massive win for Hugh Freeze and company. And then Illinois, it would have been the win that kind of solidified where they were supposed to be. It all went the other direction. And it was incredible wins for all those teams, Texas Tech, Michigan, Oklahoma, and Indiana. Incredible stuff from them. But let's take our break. Let's take a little bit of a break here because we had a lot of games that we have to talk about from this past weekend. We'll get into a couple others right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about those statement wins from teams like, I don't know why I blanked, teams like Texas Tech, Michigan, Oklahoma, and Indiana, all huge wins for them, all teams that put themselves firmly in the CFP conversation going forward with quite a bit of work to do obviously ahead. But let's get into a couple other major outcomes from this past weekend, and some of these were not quite as close as some of the other ones that we had, but let's start with Miami. Miami was able to win this one. It was not a pretty game for Miami for the vast majority of it, really. They did not play great offense. Carson Beck definitely had his worst day, and they still won by 19 points. I think that's the big takeaway from this game. Not necessarily that Carson Beck really struggled, and we'll talk about that here in a second, but the outcome of this game is proof that what Mario Cristobal is building down there is working. Because it's not just we have to find a way to get Cam Ward and Xavier Restrepo and Elijah Arroyo. We have to find a way to score 50 points. If we don't score 50 points, we're in a lot of trouble going forward. You can score 26. You can score 20. You might be able to score 17 in the game and beat a team by 7 points. You have a ridiculous defense, a ridiculous front four. Frankly, no one in college football is playing better football than Ruben Bain right now. Plain and simple, that would be my Heisman winner if we're talking about it right now. But at the end of the day, this is an incredible, incredible moment for Miami, not because it was the best football game, but because it wasn't. Because you won this one ugly. Because you won this one the way that you don't win games before, just plain and simple. And that is a huge, huge thing for the Cristobal era. Obviously, that Florida offense has not been world beaters by any respect, but this was still a dominating performance and one that I think Miami needed to prove to themselves. They could find a way to win. They get it done. They outgained Florida 103-0 in the final 11-10 of the game. Domination for Miami late in this football game. Carson Beck, worst game of the season by far, looked a little bit like that quarterback right in the middle of the season for Georgia. I think he'll tend to figure that out. Obviously, that Florida defense has given him kind of fits the last couple of years that he's played them, so not overly surprising. Went 17 for 30, 160 and a pick, so not his best day by any respect, but tend to believe that he will find his footing. But the run game was the difference in this game. For Florida, 29 carries, 80 yards, just terrible, and DJ Lagway only gave you 61 yards on top of that and 12 of 23 passing. It continues to go poorly for that offense. But on the other side, Mark Fletcher and Charmar Brown went for 196 and two touchdowns collectively on 42 carries. Charmar Brown was the leading receiver in this game. Really, really fun team that's really deep at just about every single position. I don't know if there's an alpha wide receiver one on that team. Maybe Malachi Toney, maybe CJ Daniels, but at the end of the day, they have so many guys that are going to play great ball. For Mark Fletcher, Charmar Brown, and when they get Jordan Lyle going, it's going to be an incredible, incredible group up there for Miami, and we'll definitely talk about them in my top 25, very close to the top. But at the end of the day, for Florida, I don't know. I really don't know what you do. Now, they have not fired Billy Napier as of yet. I could check my phone right now, actually, to see if they have. I don't think they have. But at the end of the day, you got to figure this thing out. I don't know where you go from here. I can't promise it's going to get better. I can't promise you're going to find a way to really figure this thing out as quickly as you want to. But at the end of the day, you got to figure it out. One way or another, you have to find a way to get this thing off the ground. It's not going to be with Billy Napier. I feel very confident in that now. What do you do from here? I don't know. But it's going to be really, really interesting to see what happens the rest of the way. I tend to believe that he is gone. I just don't know when it's going to be. As I can see right now, does not look like he has been fired. We will see what happens. But yeah, we will see what happens there. Apologies. Just wanted to make sure that he had not been fired. But at the end of the day, I think he's going to be let go here pretty soon. Probably, I don't want to say probably today. At some point, probably before the Texas game. If it's not then I don't know when it happens. And I don't know how much better this team gets. It's bad. And I'll just leave it at that for the time being. I don't think they need any more people piling on them. They get a bye week and then Texas, and then just a nightmare ahead. So strap in and we'll see what happens with Florida. We'll talk about it probably on Friday if anything does happen. Ole Miss dominates Tulane from start to finish. This is not the way I saw this game going by any means. Now, I knew there was a way that Ole Miss was going to be able to win this comfortably. You know, Tulane having fought for two big Power 4 wins, Ole Miss being the just more physical, bigger, more athletic team. I knew this was on the table. I didn't think it was going to be this aggressive, if I'm being totally honest. And Trinidad Chambliss, I think you have to go with him going forward. I think Austin Simmons is a really good football player. I think he's going to be a great ball player that is going to end up being a guy that is going to be able to lead you to a CFP. I don't think he's there yet. I really don't. I think he's a good passer of the football. I also think he gets a little bit uncomfortable, and against some of these SEC defenses, like a Georgia down the road, or an LSU this upcoming weekend, hypothetically, he's going to have to be really, really crisp. I don't think he's there yet. I also think Trinidad Chambliss adds something to your run game that you might need in the SEC schedule, with Kejuan Lacey being a good running back, but maybe you don't want to put too much on his shoulders. But he went for 307 passing, 112 on the ground, 2 touchdowns. It's incredible. It's incredible for a kid that came from the D2 Ferris State to find his way into the SEC and just have no problem. Obviously, tough SEC play is still very much ahead of him, but at the end of the day, incredible 2 starts, and they're doing their thing over there in Oxford. As for the Ole Miss front 7, I talked about it going in that this might be the issue. They're just too athletic. They're too big. They're totally different than what they have over there at Duke or Northwestern. that's kind of the way it worked out. Cam Franklin, Will Eccles, and the entire front seven up there is just too much for that Tulane run game. Now, Tulane is going to be okay. The problem is their conference has become a death trap, and we'll talk about that in the next segment. But the American champ is going to win this thing. It is going to be really hard for Tulane to find their way there. They still have Memphis and Army. This is a good football team. I think I'd still probably pick them to get to the American championship, but that one's become an absolute landmine the rest of the way. So we'll talk about that, obviously, as the season goes on. For Ole Miss, they got their season over the next month. Period. End of story. They got LSU next week, then Washington State, then they get a little bit of a bye, then Georgia at Georgia, at Oklahoma. You go 2-2, you're very much in the race for the CFP. You go 3-1, I would bet that you're in the CFP by the end of the year. Missouri is so impressive to me. They win a game 29-20 over South Carolina. This Missouri run game might just get them to the CFP. They have Maud Hardy going for 138. He, frankly, would probably be second in my Heisman right now, right behind Ruben Bain. 76 for Jamal Roberts, 72 for Beau Pribula. Beau Pribula didn't even need to really throw the ball in this football game. Incredible stuff from this offensive line. Incredible stuff from, I'm blanking on his name, and I apologize, the offensive coordinator over Kirby Moore. That's what I'm going for. Kirby Moore did an incredible job with this football team. Lenore Sellers in the South Carolina offense. You are where you are at this point. I don't see a world where you're going to find a way to put together really consistent, really awesome drives that don't just have a 50-yard touchdown. And the reality of this offense right now is they don't do that. They're not scoring points. So it's rough. You had 10 outside of 10 Lenore Sellers had 10 carries for negative 28 yards in this football game. Everyone else, 19 yards on 12 carries. So it wasn't like they were able to bail him out. It wasn't like the rest of the running team was able to really help out this offense. It was bad. If they don't hit 50-yard touchdowns, this offense is very anemic, and that's not going to happen against a lot of teams. It happened a couple of times on Saturday. Probably not going to happen against some of the maybe better defenses around the league, but bad. I'll just put it that way for the South Carolina offense and kind of the defense at this point. I came into the season saying South Carolina was going to be the disappointing team in the SEC, and it seems to be working out that way. I think they still have so much to look forward to in 2026 and the rest of this season. They absolutely can put something together. They get Kentucky this week. They get a bye week. Then it gets to LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, Ole Miss, A&M. It's going to be tough. You might need to calibrate those expectations just a little bit if you're over in Columbia, South Carolina, but over in Columbia, Missouri, this is exactly where you need to be. You have UMass this upcoming weekend. You should be able to win that. Then you got a bye week, and then it's Bama. Huge game. If you find a way to win that one, you got Auburn, Vandy, A&M, Oklahoma. It's far from finished. There's no doubt about that. Still some very, very tough games coming forward. I'm very much on the fence of CFP or not for Missouri right now, but that performance gives me a lot of confidence about this team moving forward. TCU gets a big-time win in the battle for the Iron Skillet over SMU. Josh Hoover did exactly what Sawyer Robertson did to SMU in week 2. 379 yards, 5 touchdowns, dominant. He was not remotely the star in this football game. Eric McAllister, 8 catches, 254 yards, 3 touchdowns. This kid was special. There was not a thing that SMU could do on the back end to stop this guy. He is going to be definitely the player of the week in the Big 12, but frankly, he should be a guy that you're watching the rest of the season, because if TCU is going to make a run in the Big 12, Eric McAllister is at the very center of that. For SMU, I knew it was going to be kind of a weird year, kind of an in-between year. I think the loss of Brashard Smith was a little bit bigger of a deal than some people made it out to be, but overall, the ACC schedule starts with Syracuse, a team that in week 1 you would have felt great about playing. Now, a little bit sketchy over there in Syracuse, but at the end of the day, we'll see what happens there. I think they can still get to 9 wins, maybe 8 or 9 wins probably, but definitely going to be a year where you're kind of just calibrating things, and you're trying to figure out what's the best way to go into 2026. I still think SMU will be at least a factor in the ACC moving forward. Just how big of one is hard to know right now. For TCU, they get Arizona State Friday night. They win that game. They are firmly in the race for the Big 12 championship, probably the second team behind Texas Tech, and then still have Iowa State, Baylor, BYU. So a lot of work to do, as there is for just about every Big 12 team going forward, but TCU looks about as strong as just about anyone not named Texas Tech right now. Memphis gets a huge upset over Arkansas, and it happened again. The same thing happened again. Not exactly the same thing, because they only needed the field goal this time around, but they fumbled the ball with about a minute left in the football game. They fumble the ball when they just didn't need to. They probably could have kneeled the ball out and kicked a field goal to win it. It's just devastating. I really don't know what more to say for Arkansas. It's one of those things where I think you have a good quarterback. He made some bad decisions in this game, which absolutely did not help you by any means. You're up 28-10 early on in this football game, but then that last touchdown before halftime for Memphis really got them back into it. But it's just bad. And it's one of those things where you feel like you have a good football team. You feel like you have a team that was inches away from being 3-1 right now. Maybe undefeated right now. I think they're 2-2. So yeah, 4-0 right now. If a couple of things just don't go wrong, it's devastating. There's no two ways about that. And I don't know what you do if you're Sam Pittman. You got a really tough slate coming up. And we'll talk about it here in a second, but they got ran all over in this football game. Memphis went for 294, 7.4 yards per carry, 100 yards for both Sutton Smith and Brendan Lewis, the quarterback. Sutton Smith had the play of the day with a 64-yard touchdown to take the lead, but incredible stuff from this Memphis offense. You were always going to get beat a little bit by this Arkansas offense, but in the second half, you held them to 3 points. They did not do what they usually do. They had 2 turnovers deep in your side of the field. I believe at the Memphis 22 and the Memphis 9. Incredible stuff from this Memphis defense to adjust in the second half and get enough done. For Memphis, yet again, another team in the American that is in the CFP race. They get USF, Tulane, Tulsa, and a couple other teams. So very real team. We'll see how the American works out. We got to talk about the American maybe in its own segment here at some point because that is getting absolutely crazy. But for Arkansas, it's not going to get great. You got Notre Dame next week. I'm not going to say the full schedule because it's not pretty. You get Notre Dame coming up here pretty soon. If you win that one, at the very least, you found your footing a little bit and you get a little bit of pride. But it's just 2 ways to lose a football game that just can't happen in back-to-back weeks. And I don't know where you go if you're Arkansas right now. Hopefully you regroup and get a big-time win over Notre Dame, but who knows what happens with this football team going forward. Syracuse dominates Clemson, I think is the best way to put it. I really don't know other ways to put it. It was terrible. For the 4th game in 4 games this season for Clemson, they got outplayed, outworked, and outcoached, and I don't know how that's possible. It's not even a thing where the Clemson team is just not as talented as we thought, or they're not as good as we thought. The reality of the matter is the number of teams they've played are not nearly as talented as they are. LSU aside, they are absolutely on the same level of talent. Syracuse isn't nearly as talented. They're plenty talented, obviously. They do some really great things. They have some really great players. Same thing with Georgia Tech. You should win those games 10 times out of 10. Even just based off your talent, plain and simple. So I don't know what's happening. I really don't. And it's just one of those things where you keep looking back to the offseason and thinking, you could have patched some holes. You could have added some juice to that offense. You could have added some juice to the run game. You could have added some juice to that wide receiver room, and you didn't. And I understand why you didn't. It looked like a good team, but you have to know what you need to fill, and you didn't. For Syracuse, a ton of respect. This was a team that came off the first game of the season and then the game against UConn, and you're thinking, okay, maybe it's just a step back year for Syracuse, and maybe it still is, but this is a massive win. Losing Steve Angeli really stinks. Hate that for him. Very, very terrible moment. He is going to be out for the rest of the season, so it's going to be Ricky Collins the rest of the way. Very talented kid that came over from LSU, so I don't know if it's the same level of offensive efficiency from Syracuse going forward, but I do know that Ricky Collins is plenty capable and absolutely can keep their head above water, put them in a good position moving forward. I would say more about Clemson, but I'm not sure what more there is to say. You go down by 10 before you even touch the ball. You're never within 10 points. You have 3 turnovers on downs, 2 fumbles, and INT. It was just terrible from start to finish, and it's the 4th week that I'm saying that. It was terrible from start to finish, and I don't know what to make of this football team now. So we'll see what happens. Dabo's not going anywhere, I can promise you that. We'll see what happens going forward, but it's rough. I won't get into their schedule because I don't know if it really matters going forward. For Syracuse, they're in a position where they get Duke this upcoming weekend. Going to be really, really interesting to see what they can do, but at the end of the day, this is going to be a really, really interesting team the rest of the year. There's one of those teams like a Georgia Tech, like a Louisville, like I would say Cal, but they got rolled this past weekend by San Diego State for some reason. But at the end of the day, a couple of these teams are sitting on the outside just hoping they can find a way to sneak in past a Florida State or a Miami at the end of this thing. But An incredible weekend of football, a couple of upsets there. I don't know if you can call beating Clemson an upset at this point, if I'm being totally honest. But Memphis gets a huge win to join the craziness that is the American CFP party, and TCU gets a win that probably puts them right up there with Texas Tech at the top of the Big 12. But we got more games to talk about. We got to get into a week 4 whip around right after this. We got Oregon topping Oregon State. We'll talk about Texas and Arch Manning and the debacle online that has happened with that. We'll talk about USC getting a win, Arizona State getting a massive win, and everything like that right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about a number of big-time performances from this past weekend. Missouri gets a huge win that puts them in CFP contention. TCU jumps to the top of the Big 12 with a win over SMU. Memphis gets a massive upset and a number of other things, but we got a couple other games. Let's do a little bit of a whip around to, I believe, 9 different games that I felt we should touch on. A couple in the group of 5 that I feel like we got to talk about at the end, but let's go ahead and start with one of the top teams in the country. Oregon gets a pretty comfortable win, 41-7 over Oregon State. They kind of sleptwalked through the first half of this game, did not necessarily play great football, but they found their footing, they found their offensive footing, and went on to win this one. Totally makes sense. They got a big one next week against Penn State, and just can't wait. We'll talk about all of that stuff on Wednesday. It's going to be probably a longer show on Wednesday if I had to imagine, because there's too much stuff to talk about. But at the end of the day, you had 3 guys over 60 yards in this football game. Incredible stuff. None of them went over 70, which is pretty cool, and all of them had a touchdown. So you're really rolling the ball around. You're getting all the guys the ball. Kenyon Sadiq is an absolute problem. I don't think there's going to be a linebacker, DB, safety, doesn't matter, that can guard that dude. He is absolutely incredible and someone that's going to be a huge portion of what Oregon's going to do this year. Dante Moore went for 304 and 4 touchdowns. The big test still awaits for this football team. We'll see what they're really made of this weekend, but an incredible team that just continues to play crisp football. Texas finally looks like the Texas that we thought they were going to be coming in. They beat Sam Houston State 55-0. It was Sam Houston State. Let's just make that very, very clear off the top. So not a good football team, something that Texas very well should have done. In a game like this, they were able to do. That being said, they hadn't done what they should have been able to do the first 3 games of the season. Arch Manning had a very nice day, 320 total yards, 5 total touchdowns. And people got really mad that he stared down someone. And this was a conversation that went on kind of weirdly all over the internet. I didn't think it was all that big of a deal, but at the end of the day, people were going to get their fodder out of it when it's Arch Manning. Totally understand that. I don't see the big deal. I'll be totally honest with you. This is a kid that played 3 weeks where he did not play the football that he is capable of, that a lot of people know he's capable of. And people came down on him. People were telling him that he was going to be Ben Simmons, that he was going to be the Markelle Fultz of college football, that he wasn't worth his star rating, that he's actually just not a good player. He's never going to be good. The problem that he has are not fixable. He heard all of that. And he has a moment where he walks into a touchdown for the very first time. It didn't matter who it was in front of him. They were going to get a little bit of crap. And frankly, that guy that he talked a little crap to, you'll find earlier in the game, talked a little crap to him. So all is fair on the football field. He didn't get physical. He didn't do anything aggressive. People got to calm down. I get it with Sam Houston State. I get it's not all that impressive. The kid had a lot on his shoulders going into that football game. He's letting out some emotion. Calm down, everyone. But at the end of the day, a lot of Arch Manning talk is going to be all over the place. A lot of people saying Arch Manning is back and Texas is going to keep rolling. I got to see it against Florida, plain and simple. Sam Houston's, it looked good. It looked a whole lot better. He looked on time, looked on target, looked confident, all of that great stuff. They scored on 9 straight drives. Incredible, incredible stuff from the Texas offense. Do it against Florida, and then we have a conversation. If you do it against Florida, then I know that you went against a really good defense and were able to execute at a high level. As of right now, I just know that you can dominate the teams that you should dominate, which doesn't really tell me all that much. Notre Dame gets a comfortable win, 56-30 over Purdue. I don't know why NBC stayed on this game instead of going to Indiana, Illinois. I was screaming at my TV for a very long time. But at the end of the day, Notre Dame gets a win for the first time this year. They needed it. I don't feel confident about this football team. I'm sorry, you give up 30 points to Purdue, and all due respect to Purdue, they're playing good football. They're a much better football team than they were last year. A ton of respect to Barry Odom. Nitro Tuggle is an absolute problem coming over from Georgia, but at the end of the day, you can't give up 30 points to Purdue. You just can't. You can't find a way to give up 30 points to this team. Now, Jeremiah Love went for 157 and 2 scores. Jadarian Price, 72 and 3 touchdowns. It all worked out. It was fine. Purdue couldn't run the ball, which is a plus, no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, Notre Dame's got a lot of defensive things they got to figure out, and they got a couple of teams in a USC, in a Pitt, and a couple of teams that if you don't get the pass defense figured out, they're going to go for 400 on you, and you're going to lose that game because, again, you just can't figure it out defensively. I tend to believe they will, but time's running a little bit short now. USC gets a win over Michigan State late night, 45-31. This one was a battle. It was kind of an interesting game where USC was relatively in control. I don't mean it was a battle like they were back and forth and down to the wire, but just USC was relatively in control in this one. Michigan State just kind of kept punching. There was just that moment where you're like, okay, Michigan State, they're officially put away. That's that. And then they make a big play, and then it happened again, and then they make another big play. So they hung around for long enough in this football game. The USC defense is not where it needs to be. I do think it's a little bit better of a unit than they've had in the past, but at the end of the day, a little bit better is not going to be good enough to get you where you want to go. They got a huge one against Illinois this upcoming weekend, and if Jaden Maiava plays at that level, they're probably going to put up a lot of points the same way Indiana did. Now, can you stop the Illinois offense? That's a big-time question, but they win that game. They're in the CFP race at the very least. Still some very tough games coming forward, but a very interesting team that looks a whole lot like a normal Lincoln Riley team that he had at Oklahoma. I don't think they're going to make I'm not to say that they're going to make the playoff, but to say that if they don't score 45 points a game, they might lose a whole lot of football games. Duke wins 145-33 over NC State. This was kind of a weird game. It felt like NC State was in relative control early on in this football game, and then Duke just kind of took it and took over. They had 3 INTs, a forced fumble on on CJ Bailey. An incredible game from this defense where you still give up 33 points, but you make the plays when you need to make them, which is a huge thing for a Manny Diaz football team. Really incredible performance from Duke here, and one that they absolutely needed. I don't think either of these teams are really in the ACC hunt overall. Maybe things get a little bit crazy the rest of the way and Duke can run the table and do something awesome, but at the end of the day, just a really fun football game over there in the ACC. Arizona State gets one that they very badly needed, 27-24 on a walk-off field goal over Baylor. If they didn't get this one, it would have been a very weird time. They lost the game to Mississippi State. They played good enough against Texas State, not perfect, but found a way to win this one, and you're in a position where at least you're in a winning position. Going into conference play, you got to beat TCU this weekend. If you don't beat TCU, I believe on Friday night, you're going to have a problem because there is going to be a ton of games forward where you have Utah, Texas Tech over the next 2 games. It's not going to get better. You have to find a way to win on Friday if you want to be in the conversation. If they don't, this might just be one of those years that Arizona State just has to kind of piece their way through and then continue to build going into 2026. And for Baylor, it's just not the team defensively they need to be. They're going to play way too many teams that have the offensive firepower to take advantage of it, and I don't think it's going to get easier for them. Quickly, Tulsa beat Oklahoma State. I don't know. I have no earthly idea how this is happening. I don't know what happened to Mike Gundy and the Oklahoma State program. It's going to come to an unceremonious end. I don't know if it's midseason. I don't know if they let him ride out the rest of the season. I know it's really bad, and you got dominated by Dominic Robertson in this game. But at the end of the day, I don't know what to make of it. I don't know what's going to happen going forward. I know that he is another guy that you're going to have to watch very closely for that headline that maybe he's let go here pretty soon. UNLV got a weird win this past weekend. They stay undefeated in the Group of 6 level. If anyone is going to be able to crack the American party they're having over there, it's probably going to be UNLV, and they're probably going to have to go undefeated. It's still a very weird team. They came back from 14 down in this football game to win it, so they got something. I'll say that. I don't know what exactly it is. I don't know if it leads to an undefeated season, but they're doing something so far. And then North Texas gets a big win in overtime over Army. They are firmly in the American race, as is Army. So the American Conference, probably going to be the craziest conference in the entire country that very few people will probably be paying attention to. But North Texas still has USF, Navy, and Rice left on the schedule. Still some work to do. Same for Army as well. But It's a very fun team that has a very, very fun offense. Some really interesting games. Not necessarily the most consequential games in the grand scheme of things, but definitely some talking points I wanted to get to there, and some group of five love that if you're not giving the group of five love, you're not doing it right. But at the end of the day, let's take our last break here. When we come back, I'll do it. I'll give you my top 25. I feel good enough about it. There's definitely some ones in there that I think people aren't going to like, but at the end of the day, that's the world that we live in. So I'll talk about it right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some kind of miscellaneous games, some games that I just found very, very interesting from this past weekend, but let's go ahead and get into it. My top 25. The first one that I'm doing this year, and I will continue to do it every single week going forward. Don't really get the whole preseason / early season polls. I tend to believe week 4 is right around the sweet spot. So that's where we are. We just finished week 4, and I got a top 25 for you. Let's start with my 20 through 25. Let's start with 25 just to make this easier. Washington. I think they're the most criminally underrated team in the country. The defense definitely does need some work, but when you have Damon Williams, Jonah Coleman, Denzel Boston, and all of the guys they have offensively with Jed Fish calling plays, they're playing some really good football and deserve way more respect than they're getting. I think they're the 25th best team in the country, and that sets up a big-time matchup against Ohio State here pretty soon. Auburn at 24. I don't think they should have been knocked out for their loss to Oklahoma. That was a game where they probably should have won it if it was officiated correctly in some respects. So at the end of the day, I think they're in a great position going forward. That defensive line is an absolute nightmare to deal with. They got to get more from their quarterback. There's no two ways about that. But if they can get a little bit more from their quarterback, then they can do some really awesome things this year. TCU at 23. This is a team that continues to put together really good football. Definitely some things that I think they need to figure out on the defensive side of the ball. But at the end of the day, definitely a team that's going to be in the mix for the Big 12. Mississippi State at 22. Maybe a little bit too high for some people, but at the end of the day, this is a very good football team that got a massive win against Arizona State, and they continue to handle their business at a very high level. Kind of stumbled just a little bit this past weekend, but not by much. Really handled their business late, and that's an offense that I think can give people fits. They get Tennessee this upcoming weekend, so it could get interesting in a hurry. And then USC is my number 20 team. The offense is really rolling. The defense needs help, and that's kind of this is right in the realm where you'll see those teams that have one side of the ball that's absolutely incredible and one side of the ball that misses the mark by a margin. It's kind of where you see Iowa a lot of the time throughout the season. That's where I'm going to put USC for the time being. I think they're playing good football. Definitely some things they're going to need to up the ante on at the very least to continue their winning ways. But those are my 25 through 20. We got Washington, Auburn, TCU, Mississippi State, and USC. Now to my 20 through 16. Alabama is my number 20 team. They're starting to find it. Some of this is eye test. Obviously, they don't have the incredible win. They got the win over Wisconsin, but nothing absolutely remarkable. They just seem to start to be finding it. There's a little bit of the eye test, a little bit of how much I respect Florida State as well, but at the end of the day, I think that's a good football team. I think they will continue to find a groove. They got a huge one this upcoming weekend against Georgia, and we will definitely be locked in on that one on Wednesday. Michigan here at 19, a great win this past weekend. The pass game worries me. It looks like a football team that's going to do a lot of really cool things, and then they're going to run into a defense that can stop their run enough, and they're not going to be able to move the ball. So I'm a little bit worried about that offense. Definitely something to figure out. Texas here at 18. This resume is not top 25, plain and simple. There's no two ways about that. This is a little bit of me thinking that this team is going to turn the corner. This is also me thinking that defense is one of the very best in the country. So I do think this is a team that absolutely is in this realm of teams. Now, is the resume in this realm of teams? No, absolutely not. They don't have a massive win. They have that loss to Ohio State. But at the end of the day, I think in terms of how good they are, how good they can be, and the corners that I tend to believe that they're going to turn, I'm going to keep them here for the time being. If they start to play really good football, they beat Florida, they beat Oklahoma, they're going to fly up the list in a hurry. I can promise you that. For Tennessee, I got them at 17, one loss, but this team is absolutely for real. They do a number of things really efficiently. Love the passing game, obviously. The run game, needs a little bit of work, but they're finding it slowly out over there. And the defense, once you get your Mod McCoy and Ricky Gibson back, you're going to be as good as just about anyone in the country. So not worried about that at all. Iowa State at 16, thought about dropping them a little bit after the Arkansas State performance, but that was bound to happen at some point for this team that has just been playing since week 0 and battling every single weekend. They get a bye week this week, or last week, excuse me, but now they're back in action, and this is a team that absolutely could be relatively fluctuating the rest of the way. I think that conference definitely makes for that, so we'll see what happens with them the rest of the way, but they just quietly taking care of their business, and I think I have them at 16 in the country. 15, Georgia Tech. I think this Georgia Tech team should be higher than they are on the list right now. I just couldn't put them higher than 15. I honestly thought about it. Going into it, I was thinking they're probably sitting somewhere around 12 or 13, maybe even 11, but just couldn't do it by the end of this thing. So I have me sitting here at 15. I think this team is absolutely incredible. Obviously, the Michigan win doesn't give the aura that it probably gave when it happened, but at the end of the day, that is still a team that you had to physically batter, and they very well did. This is a very good football team, very well coached. They have Haynes King running the offense at a very high level. I think they're going to be a team that's in the mix in the ACC all the way down to the wire. Still some things to figure out, no doubt about that. Still a schedule that isn't necessarily difficult, but definitely some ones that are a little bit more landminey than others. So we'll see what happens with this team going forward, but really impressed with what the Yellow Jackets have done thus far. Missouri here at 14. This team continues to probably be the team that impressed me the most in the entire country, other than maybe Texas Tech, which we'll talk about here in a second. But Missouri continues to put together really good performances. That run game mixed with that defense is going to give you a shot to win a lot of football games, and I'm really excited to see what they can do this year. Obviously, some big-time hurdles ahead, but they're playing great football right now. Vanderbilt at 13, the fact that they are as low as they are in the AP poll is absolutely ridiculous. They are a team that can do really, really incredible things this year. They go on the road to Blacksburg, not a good football team, but they handle business the way you should against a not a good football team. They beat the crap out of South Carolina, and then they handle business against Georgia Southern, scoring 70 points. The team just looks crisp. We talked about it earlier, a team like Indiana where you're thinking there's no way they're going to be better than they were last year. Vanderbilt's in that boat as well, and they were better than they are last year. They're an incredible, incredible football team, and one that I don't know if they're going to challenge for the SEC, but I'm not putting anything past Diego Pavia and the Commodores right now. Texas Tech at 12. This is a team that definitely shot up. There's no doubt about that. Maybe it's a little bit prisoner of the moment, but that was incredible. That defensive line is an absolute nightmare. Baron Morton or Will Hammond, that offense can move the football. They have a run game that is a little bit questionable at times, but Cameron Dickey's going to give you plenty. There's no doubt about that, so I'm not worried about this team. I think they're going to, I don't want to say run away with the Big 12, but there very well could be a margin there by the end of the year. I think they're a really good football team. Maybe this is a little bit bullish, but at the end of the day, I think 12 is a good landing spot for the Red Raiders right now. Ole Miss at 11. This team continues to put in really, really incredible performances and just kind of make it work. It hasn't been perfect by any means. Austin Simmons plays not great football up there in Kentucky. You do enough to get it done with Kejuan Lacey. You have Austin Simmons go down. Trinidad Chambliss comes in. You do enough. You find a way to win the next 2 games, and I really enjoy watching this team. I think they're going to be a factor all the way throughout the rest of the season. Into my top 10, and Indiana sits in my number 10 position. This is a top 10 team. There's no question about it. Frankly, I could have moved them much higher, if I'm being totally honest. I could have had them sitting at 5 and felt plenty comfortable. I just want to see a little bit more, and I'm not overly hyped on Illinois even going into that football game. So, obviously, definitely some things that you got to love about this team. I think they're better than they were last year. D'Angelo Pons, Aiden Fisher, nightmares. Michael Kamara up front. It's ridiculous what this team can do. And then Fernando Mendoza plays that level of football. You're going to win a whole lot of football games. There's no doubt about that. Penn State at 9. This one is absolutely a little bit more of my preseason kind of coming into this because they haven't necessarily looked super crisp. They don't have a big win yet. I just think this is a really good football team. I really do. I think they're going to be able to put things together, play really good football. A big one this weekend, obviously. If they win that one, you very well could find them number 1 in the country in next week's poll. But at the end of the day, they're playing good enough football. I'm not going to move them down too far. I could have had them right around the 11 area, but I think 9 is fair. Definitely some people that would have them much higher, but I think they're leaning on preseason too much. Maybe I'm leaning on it just a little bit, but I don't think it's too aggressive to have Penn State at 9. Frankly, I think it's a lot lower than some people would have them. Texas A&M is my number 8 team in the country. A huge win against Notre Dame. Defense is a big-time worry. There's no doubt about that. If you're going to be able to do that offensively, especially passing the football, you're going to beat a lot of teams. There's no doubt about that. And they're in a position where they move forward. If you're asking me, if you gave me two options coming into this season for Texas A&M, where you said they're going to have a ridiculous defense, they're going to shut down everyone, but the offense just can't find its footing, or you're going to have an offense that just rips people to pieces, but a defense that just can't quite find its footing, I would take the second one, because at the end of the day, I feel confident that Mike Elko is going to do enough to figure out what that defense needs to do to be opportunistic at the very least. Maybe not elite, but elite, at least get a couple of takeaways, some big-time sacks, and find a way to win football games. Florida State at 7. I think people have kind of forgotten about Florida State in a number of ways, but they played 2 layups the last couple of games, and they're rolling right along. There's a very good football team up front and on the outsides, and we'll see if they're able to find a way to beat a team like Miami coming up here pretty soon. But at the end of the day, very good football team and one that continues to impress me. LSU. This might be a little high for some people, and I totally understand that. The Nussmeier injury does affect this, and maybe it shouldn't, to be totally fair, but at the end of the day, you're able to go on the road to a place like Clemson. I get it. We know what Clemson is now. At the end of the day, you're able to get that win against a defense that was playing really much better football than they were now, at least than they are now. So I think LSU is a team that they're playing ridiculous level of defense. I think that helps them a lot here, and I know who Garrett Nussmeier is. Without the injury, I know who he is. I know what that offense can be. I think 6 is a good landing spot for them. Into my top 5, and Oklahoma is my number 5 team. This is my reach. This is the one that I think a lot of people will look at and say, they got to be around number 8 or number 9 or maybe number 12. No. This team deserves to be up here for a couple of reasons. This is one of the best defenses in the country. They absolutely are going to keep them in every single game that they play. They're going to be put in positions to win against Texas, against Alabama, against Missouri, against any playoff team that they might face with that defense. And then you have the guy. When I look around the country right about now, there are so many players, there are so many quarterbacks in particular that aren't just making the plays when they need to be made. He is doing that. He's finding a way to get the open receiver. He's finding a way to, when they need that final drive late in the game, to go down and make it against a team like Michigan, that good team, as we've seen the last couple of weeks. Also against a team like not Tennessee, excuse me, a team. Why am I blanking on who they just played? A team like Auburn, my goodness, a team like Auburn this past weekend that has played really good football, is a very good defense. I just think this team has just those couple of pieces that are going to make this thing work. The run offense definitely needs some work. They need to work on that offensive line, continuing to get better. But that's team playing really, really high-level football, and that quarterback's playing as well as anyone in the entire country right now. Oregon's my number 4 team. It's just outright dominance. No crazy teams, but no flaws as far as I'm concerned. A couple of sleepwalky performances in the first half of Northwestern and Oregon State, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to worry about that with Dan Lanning. That defense is ridiculous, flying around the field, and Dante Moore is executing that offense at a ridiculously high level. Georgia here at 3. Great win over Tennessee. Definitely some defensive issues, and I would get it if you wanted to flip them in Oregon and drop Georgia just a little bit lower. But the way that I look at it, I think this is a team that just has everything that they need. If that's the way that I want to put that, I think they have everything that they could possibly need. And like we talked about with A&M, a team that has the offense put together, the offense is exploding early on in the season, and the defense is a problem. I'm going to feel pretty confident that Kirby Smart's going to figure out that stuff. I believe I saw a stat from Jay Will over at the Film Guy Network, does a great job over there, talking about how when Kirby Smart gives up 40-plus points, the next game they don't give up 20. It's a ridiculously hard thing to do, but at the end of the day, Kirby Smart gets his defense ready. They improve throughout the season. I'm not going to worry about the Georgia defense. They're number 3 in the country right now. Ohio State, number 2, they look clean. They look really, really clean. A little bit of a slow start against Ohio. That's the only flaw of this football team. Very good team, and definitely one that will be in the national title conversation the rest of the way. Also, just watch Julian Sayin. It is so much fun to watch that guy throw the football. And then Miami is my number 1 team. This has been the most impressive team in the country. Period. End of story. I think they have the player that's playing the best in the country right now in Ruben Bain. They have a quarterback that is top 5 or top 6 in terms of quarterbacks in the country right now with Carson Beck. The wide receivers are stepping up. The offensive line and defensive line is probably the best duo in the entire country. It's a ridiculous group. There's no two ways about that. And it is a team that is going to be in this conversation deep into the season. They got a huge one against Florida State coming up here pretty soon. They win that one, they could very well be undefeated and the number one team in the country walking into the CFP. They're my number one team through 4 weeks of the college football season. Go ahead and rip it apart. There's no problem with that. There is a lot of different ways to go about it. I think Oklahoma might be a little high. Georgia might be a little high. Penn State might be a little low. There's arguments to be had all over the place. It is a crazy, crazy college football season. Early in the year, it's always going to be a little bit wild, especially with the rankings. And mine will probably move around quite a bit after this upcoming weekend because we got a lot of those teams facing off this upcoming weekend. And we'll talk about it on Wednesday. It is an incredible slate. It is about as good of a slate as you will ever see in the world of college football, and we will break it all down. I can promise you that. No two ways about that. I did want to say one thing before we get out of here. Wanted to send condolences over to the Clark family. Sean Clark, the offensive line coach for UCF and the former head coach for Appalachian State, passed away, I believe, this morning, if I'm not mistaken. The details of that have not really been released. We don't know what happened. Seems to have had a medical emergency and passed away this morning. Just wanted to send condolences to that family. Obviously a horrifying moment, and condolences to the App State football program that has connections to him, the UCF program that just lost one of their coaches. Absolutely terrible moment for them, and hopefully they can find some type of peace throughout this time. Terrible, terrible thing. Just wanted to say that before we got out of here because he absolutely deserves that. But at the end of the day, thank you so much for tuning in to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. An incredible weekend in the books. The one coming up is about 10 times better, as crazy as that sounds. We will get into it all on Wednesday. It's going to be a very long show because I got to give these games the proper love they deserve. Please do like, subscribe, comment. It's meant the world to me seeing these numbers continue to just slowly go up. Seeing a couple of comments, being able to interact with you guys means the absolute world to me. So please do like, comment, subscribe, do all of that great stuff. And I'll see you guys on Wednesday to break down just a ridiculous Week 5 slate.